I never thought I'd be sitting here, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, listening to my older sister Emily talk about becoming a foster parent. I had always prided myself on living a practical, predictable life. At 29, I was doing just fine with my routine, working as a software developer, spending weekends hiking to clear my head, and grabbing dinner with friends every now and then. Life was steady, almost too steady, until everything changed last year. My best friend, Jacob, died in a car accident. The grief hit me hard. It wasn't just losing a friend. It felt like I lost a part of myself. Jacob was the one person who knew me better than anyone else. And suddenly, I was left trying to make sense of a world that felt too empty. That's when Emily suggested I consider fostering a child. She worked in child welfare, and she'd seen firsthand how many kids were in need of stability and love. "Ryan, you've got so much to offer," she'd said. "There are kids who need someone like you." I couldn't deny it, but I wasn't sure I was the right person. My life had been quiet, even a little isolated since Jacob passed. I was used to being the reliable, practical one, never the spontaneous, adventurous type. But something about Emily's words stuck with me. As I sat with the idea, it started to grow on me. Maybe, just maybe, I could offer a child the stability I never had growing up. After our parents' divorce, I had been caught between two worlds, never quite feeling like I belonged to either. I had always tried to push those feelings aside, focusing on my career and my own well-being. But now, with Jacob gone, I found myself questioning what truly mattered. I wasn't content with just existing anymore. I wanted to make a difference, not just for me, but for someone who needed it. The idea of fostering was a leap. I wasn't sure what I was getting into, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't keep avoiding life's messier, more meaningful aspects. So I filled out the forms, attended the required training, and waited for a call. It wasn't long before Emily called me with news. "I have a girl for you, Ryan." Her voice was filled with the weight of her usual work, matter of fact, yet laced with compassion. Zoe. She was 14 years old, and her history was complicated, filled with neglect and instability. Her mother had struggled with addiction, and her father had been absent for most of her life. I was told she'd spent the last few years in foster care, moving between homes. I didn't know what to expect, but I felt something stir inside me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to take on something so big, but I knew that I wanted to try, for her, for me, and for the chance to build something meaningful again. Zoe arrived on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of rain that seemed to come down in sheets, making everything feel heavier than it already was. I had prepared myself for the worst, a defensive, angry teen, resentful of yet another temporary home. But nothing really prepared me for Zoe herself. She stepped off the bus, her eyes scanning everything with a kind of cautious scrutiny. She was tall for her age, with messy brown hair that fell into her face, and she held a worn duffel bag tightly to her chest like it was the only thing in the world she could trust. I could see it in her posture, the way she kept her distance, the closed-off way she held herself. She wasn't just physically distant, she was emotionally walled off. I could tell she was used to being let down, to being treated like she didn't matter. "Hi, I'm Ryan," I said, trying my best to sound warm and welcoming, even though I felt anything but. She barely acknowledged me. Her eyes didn't meet mine, and she shuffled past me into the apartment without a word. The silence between us was thick, almost palpable, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of uncertainty. How was I supposed to get through to her? She looked like she was already bracing herself for disappointment, as if no one had ever been able to truly see her before. I led her to the spare room, showing her where she'd be sleeping. She didn't say anything, just dropped her bag on the bed and sat down, her eyes scanning the room like it was a strange, foreign place. "I've got some dinner ready, if you're hungry," I offered, trying to break the ice. "But if you need anything, just let me know." She didn't respond. Instead, she reached down and pulled out a small stuffed bear from her duffel bag, clutching it tightly to her chest like it was her lifeline. I didn't push it. I didn't expect her to open up right away. After all, I wasn't sure I was ready for the kind of relationship this would turn out to be either. The evening passed in an uncomfortable silence, with me eating my meal alone in the living room while she stayed in her room. I could hear her moving around inside, but she never came out. It was almost like we were two strangers coexisting in the same space, each with our own walls to protect us. I tried to keep it light the next morning, making sure she knew the door was open if she wanted to talk. Still, there was no sign of her opening up anytime soon. As the days went on, I learned that Zoe wasn't used to kindness without strings attached. She wasn't used to someone offering her a meal or a place to stay without expecting something in return. Her world had been one of inconsistency and disappointment, and I couldn't blame her for expecting more of the same. But I wasn't going to give up on her. I wasn't going to let her slip through the cracks the way she had so many times before. Slowly, I started finding small ways to connect, asking about her day, talking about things I enjoyed, trying to draw her out of her shell without forcing it. Some days were better than others, but every small step forward felt like a victory. I knew it was going to be a long road, but I was ready to walk it with her, no matter how long it took. A few weeks passed, and Zoe's walls remained high. She would do her homework in silence, barely acknowledging my presence unless I asked her about dinner or if she needed anything. Every evening, she'd retreat to her room, her little bear always clutched in her arms, like a silent reminder of everything she had lost. I knew it wasn't just the bear that kept her grounded. It was the memories attached to it, memories of a life she could barely remember, but still held on to desperately. I could see the way she looked at that photo frame of her mom, the way her eyes softened and her fingers traced the edges like it was something sacred. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I noticed Zoe sitting on the couch, her legs tucked under her, the photo frame resting in her hands. She was staring at it, completely lost in thought, and I hesitated for a moment before walking over. "You miss her, don't you?" I asked, my voice gentle, though I had no idea what the answer would be. She didn't look up, but I saw her shoulders tremble slightly as she whispered, "She was supposed to be my mom, but she left. She always said she would come back, but she never did." I could hear the sadness in her voice, the way the words felt like they were breaking her all over again. It wasn't the first time she'd spoken about her mother, but something in the way she said it this time made me realize just how deeply this abandonment had hurt her. I sat down next to her, not too close, but close enough to show that I was there, that I was listening. "Sometimes people leave because they think they're protecting us," I said carefully, "even if we don't understand it at the time. But that doesn't mean they stopped loving us." Zoe didn't respond at first, but I could see her eyes were filling with tears. She quickly wiped them away, but I could tell that this was a moment for her, a moment when the walls she'd built up were starting to crack. Slowly, she turned to look at me, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I saw something other than suspicion in her eyes. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something more vulnerable, something raw. I wanted to say more, but I could see Zoe needed space, so I didn't push. I just sat there beside her, waiting in silence, letting her have this moment. The rest of the evening was quiet, but something had shifted. A small but significant crack in the emotional armor she'd carried for so long. The next few days followed the same quiet rhythm. Zoe didn't talk about her mom again, but I noticed she wasn't so quick to retreat to her room. She started asking questions. About me, about my work, about the hikes I took on weekends. At first, I thought it was a passing interest, something to distract herself with. But then, she actually agreed to come along on one of my hikes. I was surprised, but I didn't want to push it too hard. We packed our bags, laced up our boots, and headed out into the woods, with the cool morning air around us and the promise of open skies above. For the first time, Zoe seemed to relax. We didn't talk about her past, and I didn't ask. Instead, we talked about other things. What kind of music she liked, the books she read, her dream of becoming a graphic designer. For a few hours, it felt like we were just two people getting to know each other, without any of the baggage that had weighed us down. I saw a side of her that I hadn't expected. A smart, funny, and creative teenager who had a lot to say, even if she wasn't sure how to say it yet. By the time we reached the peak, Zoe was smiling, a real smile, one that lit up her face. It was the first time I saw her smile like that, and it made my heart swell. But I knew it wouldn't be that easy, that the past would catch up with her soon enough. The following week, things took a turn. Zoe had been doing better, more open, more engaged, even sharing some of her artwork with me. I thought, maybe, just maybe, we were getting somewhere. But then, one afternoon, everything seemed to fall apart. I got a call from the school. Zoe had gotten into a fight with another student, and the school had suspended her for 3 days. The news hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt that familiar sense of helplessness rise within me. When Zoe came home later that day, her usual guarded demeanor was replaced with something darker. She slammed the door behind her, and for a moment, I thought she might shut me out entirely. She threw her backpack down in the hallway and slumped into the couch, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I messed up again," she muttered, her voice shaky with frustration. "I knew it would happen. I always mess things up." I stood in the doorway, unsure of how to approach her. "Zoe, we can talk about this, but yelling and fighting, no matter who started it, isn't the answer." She didn't look at me. Her face was twisted with anger, but there was something else too. Fear, maybe, or guilt. I could see the frustration building inside her. The years of feeling like she was always one mistake away from being abandoned again. Zoe began, her voice breaking. "I don't belong anywhere. I'm always the problem. I just get moved around and I don't think I'm ever going to be good enough for anyone to keep." Her words hit me hard, but I could see how much she believed them. She was convinced that she was a failure, that no matter what she did, she was destined to be cast aside. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. This was the moment I had to prove I wasn't like the others, like the people who had let her down before. "Zoe, look at me," I said softly, stepping closer to her. "You are not a problem. You're not going anywhere. I'm not going to give up on you. You're here, and you're safe, and we'll work through this together, whether it's a fight at school or anything else." She didn't say anything for a long time, but I could see the tears threatening to spill over. Zoe had spent so much of her life feeling like she wasn't enough. It broke my heart to see her carry that weight, to see how much she had convinced herself that she wasn't worthy of love or stability. "I'm not going anywhere," I repeated, sitting down next to her on the couch. "I'm not just here for the easy moments. We'll get through the hard ones too, together." The tears came then, the first real cry I had seen from Zoe since she arrived. It was raw, unrestrained, and it felt like she was releasing everything she had been holding in for so long. I didn't rush to comfort her with words. I just sat there, letting her cry, giving her the space to feel what she needed to feel. When the tears finally subsided, Zoe wiped her eyes and looked at me. "You really mean that, don't you?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. "I do," I said firmly. "You're stuck with me, kiddo." She didn't smile, but I saw something in her eyes shift, a crack in the armor she had built up over the years. For the first time, she seemed to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going anywhere. And that meant everything to me. We weren't done yet. There would be more bumps along the road, more struggles and doubts, but for the first time, Zoe seemed to trust that we could get through them together. And that was a step forward, no matter how small. A few months passed after that moment, and things started to feel different between Zoe and me. Slowly, the walls she had built up so high began to crumble, brick by brick. There were still moments where she'd retreat into herself, still times when she looked at me with that skeptical, distant expression, but there were also more moments where she'd talk about her day, her dreams, her frustrations. She even started leaving her door open when she was in her room, a small but significant sign that she was starting to trust me. I tried to give her space to grow, but I also kept my presence steady, the same way I had promised. Our conversations became more natural, even though Zoe still kept parts of herself hidden. She'd often talk about her artwork, and I noticed that when she did, her whole face would light up. It was like the girl I saw on those rare hikes with me. The one who would relax and talk about things she loved was finally starting to emerge more often. It was clear to me that she had talent, but she wasn't sure how to embrace it. One evening, I came home to find Zoe sitting at the kitchen table, a piece of paper and a sketch pad spread out in front of her. I'd noticed she hadn't been as quiet that day. She'd been humming to herself while she worked on her drawings. When I walked in, she didn't immediately hide the sketch pad or look embarrassed. She just glanced at me with a little smile. "Hey," she said, sounding tentative but not as guarded as she usually did. "I've been working on this design for a t-shirt idea. Do you think it's any good?" I walked over, curious, and peered at the drawing. It was a bold design, full of color and energy, exactly the kind of thing I could see people wearing. "Zoe, this is awesome," I said, my voice full of admiration. "You've really got talent. Have you thought about sharing this with someone, or maybe even looking into graphic design?" Zoe's cheeks flushed a little, and for a moment, she looked away, as though she wasn't quite ready to accept the compliment. "You really think it's good?" "Definitely," I said. "You've got a great eye for detail. You should be proud of this." Her expression softened, a flicker of something resembling hope in her eyes. I could tell she was still processing the idea that someone believed in her, especially after so many years of being told she wasn't enough. But that moment, seeing her sit there, allowing herself to share something she had worked on, felt like a breakthrough. Later that night, after dinner, Zoe sat down beside me on the couch, something she hadn't done in a while. "I was thinking," she began, her voice quieter than usual. Maybe I could try out for the art club at school. I don't know if I'm good enough, but—" "You are," I interrupted gently. "Zoe, you are good enough, and you have something unique to offer. It's worth trying, at least." She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like she was weighing my words. Then, finally, she nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Yeah, maybe I will." It wasn't just about the art club or even the drawing anymore. It was about Zoe finally allowing herself to believe in her potential. She was starting to see that she wasn't defined by her past mistakes or the uncertainty that had shadowed her life. She was capable of more, so much more, and I was beginning to see the person she could be, even if she hadn't fully realized it herself yet. The next day, Zoe handed me the application for the art club with a small but proud look on her face. "I turned it in," she said, a little nervous but determined. "I think I want to give this a shot." I looked at her, and I knew in that moment that she was already succeeding, whether she realized it or not. She was taking a chance on herself, something she hadn't done in a long time. I couldn't be more proud of her. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just her foster parent. I was someone who could see her, not just as a troubled teen, but as a person with infinite possibilities ahead. I was ready to stand by her for the long haul, to help her figure out where those possibilities would take her. The weeks following Zoe's decision to try out for the art club brought a kind of quiet excitement to our home. Zoe didn't talk much about the process, but I could tell it mattered to her. She spent more time working on her sketches, perfecting details, and even started experimenting with digital design on my old laptop. It was a side of her I hadn't seen before, the creative spark that had been buried under layers of hurt and self-doubt. It was like she was finally allowing herself to be the person she was meant to be, not the version of herself that had been shaped by years of instability and disappointment. One evening, as I was wrapping up work on my laptop, Zoe came into the living room, her hands gripping a small envelope. "Ryan?" she said, her voice a little unsure, but also filled with anticipation. I got into the art club. I didn't know what to say. I felt a lump in my throat, and I could see her standing there, waiting for my reaction. This wasn't just about the club. This was about Zoe believing in herself, taking a step forward without the heavy fear of failure that had always held her back. "I knew you would," I said, standing up and pulling her into a quick hug. "I'm so proud of you, Zoe. This is just the beginning." She looked up at me, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "I don't think I would have done it without you," she said, her voice soft, but the sincerity in it was clear. "You kind of made me believe I could." My heart swelled. It wasn't just the art club acceptance, it was everything leading up to it. The small steps she'd taken, the moments where she allowed herself to trust me, to trust that she wasn't going to be abandoned again. I had watched her grow from a girl who barely spoke to someone who was finally starting to claim her place in the world. We celebrated her acceptance quietly, with pizza and a movie in the living room. But even as we sat there watching the movie, I couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. This was the Zoe who once wouldn't even look at me, the girl who kept her emotions buried deep. Now she was opening up, showing me glimpses of her talent, her dreams, and most importantly, her belief in herself. The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind for Zoe. She threw herself into the art club, sketching designs, talking about her projects, and even asking me for feedback on her work. It wasn't just about art anymore. It was about her learning to express herself, to put parts of her heart onto paper without fear. I watched her confidence grow with each passing day, and I knew this was just one of the many breakthroughs she would experience in the years to come. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Zoe still had her moments of doubt, the fears that crept back when things got too quiet or when she faced challenges that felt too big. One night, as we sat together doing some of her homework, I could tell something was weighing on her. She put her pencil down and stared at her desk, lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" I asked gently. "I don't know," she said, her voice small. I still feel like I don't fit in, like I'm just gonna mess it all up again." I walked over and sat next to her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Zoe, you belong here. You belong with me. And you're not going to mess anything up. No matter what happens, I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." She didn't say anything for a moment, but I saw her shoulders relax. Slowly, she nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. It was moments like these, when she let me in, even just a little, that reminded me of how much we had both changed. She was no longer the girl who believed she was destined to fail. She was learning, slowly but surely, that she had a place here with me, that she was more than her past. And in return, I was learning too, that being a parent, whether by blood or not, wasn't about having all the answers. It was about showing up, being patient, and letting the person you love take the lead on their own journey. As Zoe took steps forward in her life, I was right beside her, cheering her on every step of the way. A few months later, things began to settle into a new rhythm. Zoe was more confident now, no longer the guarded, silent girl who first arrived at my apartment. She was still figuring out who she was, but it was becoming clear to me that she was starting to believe in her potential. She was thriving in art club, had made a few friends at school, and even started talking about college, which was something I never thought I'd hear from her. Every little step forward felt like a victory, and I found myself genuinely excited about what her future might hold. But with that progress came moments of doubt, moments when I saw her hesitate, when the old fears crept back in. One of those moments came a few weeks ago, when Zoe received an invitation to a school art show. She had submitted one of her designs, and it had been selected for the exhibition. But instead of feeling elated, she seemed anxious, almost nervous about going. "I don't know, Ryan," she said one evening, sitting at the kitchen table, pushing around her dinner. "What if my work isn't good enough? What if people make fun of it?" I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the same uncertainty that had haunted her for years, the fear that no matter what she did, it wouldn't be enough. "Zoe, listen to me," I said, sitting across from her. "Your work is amazing. I've seen how hard you've worked, how much time and effort you've put into it. This is a huge opportunity, and it's proof of how much you've grown. You deserve this. And if anyone makes fun of you, that's on them, not you." She was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the table. "But what if I'm not good enough?" I reached out and placed a hand on top of hers. "You are good enough. You're more than good enough. But it's okay to be scared. You're allowed to feel nervous. Just don't let that stop you from taking the chance. You won't know unless you try." Zoe looked up at me then, her eyes searching mine. There was a flicker of something, hope maybe, or just a hint of belief, before she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll go." The day of the art show came, and Zoe was a bundle of nerves. She didn't say much on the drive over, but I could tell she was processing everything in her own way. We arrived at the school auditorium, and I could see her hesitating as she walked into the room, her gaze scanning the artwork displayed on the walls. It was quiet at first, and I saw her shrink back, almost as if she wanted to disappear into the crowd. But then, something shifted. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the table where her work was displayed. As she stood there, looking at her piece in front of others for the first time, I saw the transformation in her. It wasn't just the way she stood, it was the way she let herself be seen, the way she allowed her art to speak for her. The fear didn't disappear entirely, but she didn't let it control her anymore. "See?" I said quietly, standing beside her. "Told you you'd do great." Zoe smiled, this time a real smile that reached her eyes. "I'm glad I did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks for making me believe I could." In that moment, I realized just how far Zoe had come and how far I had come too. We both still had our doubts, our moments of fear and uncertainty, but we were learning to face them together. It wasn't just about fostering a child anymore. It was about being a family, supporting each other through the hard times, and celebrating the victories, no matter how small they seemed. And that, I realized, was the greatest reward of all. A few months after the art show, Zoe seemed to be settling into a rhythm I had hoped for, but I knew better than to think everything was smooth sailing. The scars from her past, the uncertainty, and the fear of abandonment didn't vanish overnight, no matter how much progress she made. There were still days when she would retreat into herself, quieter than usual, and it was those days that reminded me that her healing wasn't linear. It would take time. It was a Friday afternoon when I came home to find her sitting on the couch, her phone in her lap, her gaze distant. I could tell something was off. There were no sounds of her usual playlists or the hum of the TV like there normally was. "Hey, Zoe, everything okay?" I asked, putting my bag down by the door. She looked up at me slowly, her face conflicted, and then shrugged. "Just tired," she muttered, but I could see through the lie. She wasn't just tired, she was troubled. I sat next to her on the couch, not pushing her, but giving her the space to talk if she wanted to. "I'm just not sure," she began, staring at her phone again. "I've been working hard in art club, and I thought I was making progress. But today I saw a post online. Someone posted my art from the show, and they made fun of it. Not just my art, me. They said it was childish and basic, and it just made me feel like I was stupid for even trying." I felt my chest tighten. I'd seen the kind of cruelty people could hide behind screens, but hearing it hurt someone I cared about cut deep. "Zoe, I'm so sorry that happened," I said, my voice softer now. "But one person's opinion doesn't define your worth, and anyone who thinks your work is basic clearly doesn't see the effort, the emotion, and the talent behind it." She sniffled and wiped her eyes, still looking down at her phone. It sucks. I was doing okay. I felt like maybe I was finally starting to belong somewhere. But then I see things like that, and it just reminds me how I'll never be good enough. Maybe I should just stop trying to get people to notice me, stop pushing to be good at something. What's the point if people are just going to tear it all down? I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me wanted to tell her that the world wasn't as harsh as it seemed, that it wasn't always going to be like this. But the truth was, it wasn't about protecting her from every negative comment. It was about teaching her how to handle them, how to keep going despite them. "Zoe, I get that it hurts. I do," I said, my voice firm but kind. "But you have to remember why you do this. You create because it makes you feel something, because it's your way of expressing who you are. People are always going to have opinions, but the only opinion that matters is your own. Don't let someone who doesn't even know you control how you see yourself or your art." She was quiet for a while, the only sound being the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Finally, she spoke, her voice smaller now but stronger, like she was pulling herself back from the edge. "I guess you're right. I just need to remember that not everyone's opinion is worth listening to." I smiled, relieved to see the light returning to her eyes. "Exactly. And if anyone ever tries to bring you down, you just remember who you are. You're strong, you're talented, and you're worth more than some anonymous comment online." Zoe looked at me then, a hesitant smile on her face. "Thanks, Ryan. I don't think I'd be able to handle this without you." "You don't have to handle it alone," I said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "We've got this together." That night, Zoe spent some time sketching again. She didn't mention the hurtful comment, but I could see her fingers moving more confidently across the paper, as if the weight had lifted just a little. We both knew there would be more bumps in the road ahead, but for the first time in a while, I felt that we were navigating it together, not just as foster parent and child, but as a real family. And in that moment, that was enough. It was just past the 6-month mark when I started to feel like Zoe, and I had really settled into something that resembled a family. There were still moments of hesitation, of doubt, on both our parts, but the growth I had witnessed in her was undeniable. She was no longer the quiet, withdrawn girl who kept to herself, hidden behind walls. Instead, she was becoming someone who spoke up, who pursued her passions, and who slowly was learning to trust that she wasn't going to be abandoned again. But even as things seemed to be getting better, there were still days when Zoe struggled with what I'd come to understand was her greatest fear, being left behind. I saw it in the way she'd look at me sometimes, as though she was bracing herself for something, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She would pull away for a little while, isolating herself in her room or staying quiet at dinner, and I'd know what was happening inside her. She feared that the love I gave her, the stability I offered, was just temporary. She feared that I'd give up on her the same way everyone else had. One Saturday afternoon, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, Zoe walked in, her backpack slung over her shoulder. Her posture was different, more rigid than usual. "I'm going to head to the library for a bit," she said, her voice somewhat strained. "I've got some stuff I need to work on." I nodded, brushing a few crumbs into the trash. "Sure, take your time. You need a ride, or are you okay to walk?" "I'm fine," she said quickly, but her eyes avoided mine. Something wasn't right. I could feel it in the air. "Okay, just be safe," I added. But I knew it wasn't just the usual goodbye. There was something more to her tone, something I couldn't put my finger on. About an hour later, I found myself pacing in the living room. Zoe had been gone longer than I'd expected, and the nagging feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. I tried to dismiss it, to trust that she was fine, but the unease didn't subside. After another 20 minutes, I grabbed my keys and decided to check on her. When I reached the library, I spotted Zoe standing outside, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring at the ground. She didn't see me right away, so I approached her slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Zoe?" I said softly. She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise, but there was something more in them. Something that tugged at my heart. Her expression was a mix of relief and something darker, like she had been holding something in for too long. "Ryan," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I wasn't sure if I should come back. I didn't want to burden you, and I didn't know if you'd want to keep doing this." The words hit me like a wave, and it took everything in me not to step forward and wrap her in my arms right then. This was the thing I had feared the most, that she still wasn't sure she had a place with me, that despite everything, she thought she might not be wanted. "Zoe," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "you're not a burden. You never have been. I want you here. I want you to be here. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not giving up on you." Her eyes welled up, and she took a shaky breath. "But what if I mess up again? What if I'm just too much to handle?" I took a deep breath, stepping closer to her. "You won't mess up, Zoe. And even if you do, that doesn't change anything. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for good, no matter what happens. I'm not going to leave you." There was a long silence between us, and in that moment, I could see the walls breaking down. Slowly, Zoe stepped forward and hugged me, her arms wrapping around me tightly, as though she were trying to reassure herself that this wasn't a dream, that I wasn't just another person who would eventually disappear. "I'm sorry," she whispered against my chest. I don't want to lose you." "I'm not going anywhere," I said again, my hand gently rubbing her back. "I'm here, and I'm not leaving." Zoe stayed in my arms for a moment longer, and when she pulled away, there was a new kind of resolve in her eyes. I knew then that she had taken another step forward. The fear was still there, buried deep, but she was learning how to let go of it, to trust that she wasn't alone anymore. Together we walked back home, and I realized just how far we had come. We weren't perfect. We would still have our struggles. But for the first time, Zoe truly seemed to believe that she had a place here with me, and that was all I had ever wanted for her. It had been over a year since Zoe officially became a part of my life, and in that time, everything had changed. Not just for her, but for me too. When she first came to live with me, I had no idea what to expect. I was navigating my own grief, my own uncertainties, and the idea of fostering felt like a leap of faith. But Zoe and I had created something together, something that went beyond the typical foster parent and foster child relationship. We had built a family. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. The transition from foster parent to adoptive parent wasn't something I had thought too much about initially. I wanted to help Zoe, to give her the stability and love she deserved, but somewhere along the way, I realized I was falling for her. Not in a romantic way, but in a deep, fatherly way. I had come to care for her in a way I never thought I could, and I could tell that Zoe had started to trust me, to see me as someone who wasn't going to leave her like so many others had. One morning, as we sat down for breakfast, something that had become our little ritual, Zoe turned to me, her eyes serious but full of something new. "Ryan, I've been thinking." I set my coffee down, knowing this was more than just casual chatter. "About what?" "I know you're always saying I don't have to worry about messing up," she started, picking at her pancakes. "But I've been thinking about what it means to actually be a family. I mean, for real." My heart skipped a beat. I had known this conversation was coming, but hearing her say it out loud felt like a moment of clarity for both of us. She was finally ready to accept the reality of what we had built, and it was the moment I had been waiting for. "Go on," I said softly. She looked at me, her expression vulnerable. "I want to be your daughter, not just while I'm living here, but for real. I want you to adopt me." I didn't know what to say at first. A part of me had always been afraid of taking that final step, of making things permanent, even though I knew deep down that I had already accepted her as my own. But hearing Zoe ask for it, to make it official, was the final piece of the puzzle. "You don't have to ask, Zoe," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Of course I'll adopt you. You already are my daughter. Nothing's going to change that. I've wanted that for you, for us, for a long time." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled, really smiled. It wasn't a tentative, unsure smile like the ones I had seen in the early days. It was one of pure, unfiltered joy, the kind of smile that made me realize just how far we had come. The adoption process wasn't quick or easy. There were paperwork to file, court dates to attend, and the long wait for everything to be finalized. But throughout it all, Zoe and I stood together. We celebrated the small victories, like when we'd receive a letter from the court, or when I'd see Zoe excitedly picking out things for her room as she started to feel more settled. The day of the adoption hearing finally came, and I could feel the weight of the moment. I wasn't just walking into a courtroom for a legal formality. I was walking in to make Zoe's place in my life permanent. We both knew what this meant. It was a new beginning, a new chapter. It was the moment that would define our future. When the judge declared us a family, I couldn't hold back the tears. Zoe looked up at me, and for the first time in her life, she didn't have to worry about being abandoned. She had a family now, and that family was me. We walked out of that courtroom hand in hand, and I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with pride. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a promise that no matter what, we were in this together. Zoe was no longer the girl who was afraid of being let down. She was my daughter, and nothing could change that. In that moment, I realized that family doesn't always come from blood. It's built on trust, love, and the willingness to choose each other, day after day. And as we stepped into the future, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. In life, don't be afraid to open your heart to others, even when it feels uncertain. Healing takes time, and growth often happens in small, quiet moments. Surround yourself with people who believe in you and learn to believe in yourself. Trust that no matter how many times you fall or doubt your worth, you are capable of rising again. Family isn't defined by blood. It's built on love, support, and choosing to be there for one another. Take chances, embrace vulnerability, and never forget that your worth isn't determined by others' opinions, but by your own resilience and kindness.